It's the horrible truth about what we do is that the moment you want to sell is like the moment your business is least valuable, right? and the opposite is true, right? Like when your business is the most valuable, you'll never want to sell it. Can this business thrive without the owner?
You got to start putting systems and processes in place. If you don't use the systems, the business will break.
We're always looking to buy back our time.
You cannot say something once and expect that it actually is received.
This is the way we work.
A big motivation in that for me is creating a job for myself that I really enjoy.
This is how you discover your vision.
And this is Process Makes Perfect. Welcome to Process Makes Perfect. I'm Chris Ronzio, founder of Trainual, and today I'm here with John Warrillow, the author of one of my favorite books, Built to Sell. And
I'm blushing, man. I'm blushing.
So in addition to being a best-selling author of Built to Sell and his next book, The Automatic Customer, John has started and exited 4 companies. So he is one of the foremost experts on B2B marketing for small businesses, and we are thrilled to have him here. John, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I first read your first book, Built to Sell, 5 or 6 years ago. It was being passed through the circle of my friends and everyone wanting to exit their companies. And I actually read it again, cover to cover, last week. And my wife was interested. And because of the format that you wrote the book in, if you haven't read the book, it's written in a fictional style where it's a story of this guy, Alex, and his agency as he tries to position his company for sale. So it was so intriguing that my wife took the book for me and she read it cover to cover. And so I think that says something. What made you decide to write the story in that format?
Good question. I think because I wanted to write, I'd done 4 exits, building 4 companies, and each of them, I'm under confidentiality agreement. I can't talk about specifically what happened in any one of the exits. So by creating a fictional story, it allows me to just make it all up. And so, within all of that story, there are little sprinkled lessons from both my own personal experience along with stuff that I've heard. But as soon as you make it public and say, this is what happened to me, you have to dilute it down so much that it becomes boring to read. So it's a compilation of lessons I learned through my own exits, along with, I ran a company where we interviewed 10,000 entrepreneurs a year. We did quantitative market research. And so I've spent a lot of time talking to and interviewing and listening to the stories of entrepreneurs. So it's kind of an amalgam of all that. And I thought just the story was a good way to do it.
Yeah, the format was so interesting. And there was this one situation early in the book where the entrepreneur was out to lunch with a customer. And I remember reading this paragraph where he was afraid to pay for the bill because he thought that it might be over the limit, but he was excited about the credit card points. And I just laughed and thought, you nailed so perfectly the small business mindset. So obviously you have some experience in this area.
Yeah, I've been the guy with the Amex going, oh, do you think the gods back at compliance are going to let this card pass one more time? Yeah.
So at the end of the book, you have an implementation guide, which I also found really interesting. And it's kind of a step-by-step sequence. So after you go through the story, here's the roadmap. Here's how to do it. So in your 4 exits and 4 experiences building those companies, did the recipe change a bit over time? Or how did you put that formula together in writing the book?
Yeah, again, it's kind of an amalgam of experiences. I don't know that it changed. It probably got more refined. I'll tell you what did get much more pronounced is the importance of recurring revenue. I sort of understood recurring revenue at a high level and kind of chalked it up as, yeah, of course, recurring revenue is important to an acquirer, but I really had no idea how important it was. And so, we've done a bunch of research at Value Builder and shows that there are these 8 key drivers of company value, what acquirers look for. And recurring revenue is arguably the most important. And it's one that, a lot of entrepreneurs, when they hear recurring revenue, they think SaaS companies, right? They think, oh yeah, well, that's great for a SaaS company, but I run a food truck or I run a flower store or whatever. Wouldn't apply to me. And I think that's a mistake because, I think virtually any industry can create some recurring revenue. And of course, it just makes your business so much more valuable to acquirers.
So as you're developing a recurring revenue stream, how important is specialization in terms of that recurring revenue model? Is it that you are specialized in a few products and services and that you charge in a recurring revenue format? Or is it a few different revenue streams?
So Specialization, I don't think has a lot to do with recurring revenue. I think the reason as an entrepreneur you want to specialize is because you're putting finite resources, very finite resources, against one idea. And as soon as you dilute that by going after 2 or 3 different target market segments or with 2 or 3 different product ideas, they'll all fail because you're just taking a very small amount of money or resources and diluting it and dissecting it in 2, 3, 4 ways. So from my experience, I would pick one target segment, and at least until you're $1 million or $2 million in revenue before you start worrying about what the next target market could be or what the next product could be. When it comes to recurring revenue, that's really, I think, a slightly different idea. Like you could look at something like a Netflix, where there's obviously it's an entire business model based on recurring revenue. There's all kinds of different customers at Netflix. Most are consumers, but there's all kinds of different customers. So they've got tremendous variety among their customer pool, but it's really selling the same solution, if that makes sense.
Sure. So when you set out to build a business with the intention of selling, or maybe not, do you pick the thing that you're specializing in out of the gates, or do you think it's important to try a lot of things and, like your character in the book, then look back and understand what you've done really well and what's worked the best?
Look, I think if you can niche down to begin with, you're going to accelerate your speed to scale much faster. And I got this wrong in virtually every business that I've run. I'm not really a planner. I'm much more iterative, and so I've done. My typical model is kind of put a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And that's burned me a few times. And so if I had the rigor or to do it over again, I think kind of trying to think through a little bit more, what is the offering? I think shortcuts you a lot. So I would, it's in lean or terminology. It's kind of popular these days to talk about your basic product that you could market and sell. I'm a big fan of that but I wouldn't try to create 3 basic products. I try to create kind of one concept and say, does this have legs? Can I get somebody to buy it?
So the more specialized you can be out of the gates, the more time you can cut down as you're trying to build a sellable company.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, if you're not specialized out of the gate, you run the risk of running out of money. You run the risk of creating a bunch of businesses that need different staffing models, need different people with different expertise. And then you've got a round peg in a square hole. How do I get rid of this person who I've hired to do X where I realize that I actually need Y? Like, it just creates a bunch of mess, which I've lived through many times. So I would, if you could, specialize early, figure out kind of one product, one service, one target segment, and try to get that off the ground before you start to go too wide with what you're offering.
So for businesses that already exist, like the Stapleton agency did in the example in your book, looking back at all of the different products and services that they offer, are there certain things that you recommend they evaluate those offerings based on to see what they should really decide to go all in on?
Yeah, at Valuability, we use this model called TVR. It stands for Teachable, Valuable, Repeatable. So teachable is, so basically what you would do is you get a whiteboard and you write down all the services and products that you sell. And then you would score them on three dimensions: how teachable they are to employees, how valuable they are to customers, and how repeatable they are, meaning what kind of recurring revenue stream you can get out of that product. And then really what you're looking for is the service or product that scores highest in an aggregate across those 3 dimensions, and that's your TVR, and that's really where I would start.
Got it. Okay. So if you decide that you've picked the one thing that you're going to focus on and you're going to say no to everything else, it's almost definitely going to impact your revenue. And as most entrepreneurs try to build their business, they think the more revenue I've got, the more attractive I'll be to an acquirer. So how do you think about the difference between revenue and the actual value of a business, even if revenue shrinks as you're pursuing this?
Yeah. So, when an acquirer looks at buying a company, they're making a build or buy decision. They may not tell you that, but essentially they're looking at your company and saying, do they have something that's really truly unique that would take us a lot of money or a lot of time to replicate? Or is it something that we could just go replicate without acquiring the company. If the latter's true, then they won't buy your business. They'll simply try to compete with you, right? And so the latter is true when what you've created is a commodity or something that's not really differentiated. And so if you're responding to RFPs, for example, to just get to the next level of revenue, it may feel good, but it actually doesn't get you very far, because an acquirer will look at that revenue you gain through winning an RFP, and in many cases they'll look at it and discount it dramatically, because they'll say, that's really just being acquired through better pricing. And the same rules that made them go to the RFP in the first place means that they're going to have to RFP the business in a year or two anyways, and we'll go through the same song and dance. So if you're bidding on price or selling on price, for example, in an effort just to build the top line of your revenue, it's a bit of a fool's errand in the sense that you're really not adding any value to your company, and you're creating a lot of complexity. Where acquirers look at a business and they say, wow, I want what they've created. Like when Microsoft bought LinkedIn as an example, they looked at that and said, man, LinkedIn is the professional social network. They've carved out some unique territory against Facebook and the others at the time. It would take us years and billions to create that. Let's go buy that because that's a strategic asset for us. If it were a generic Me Too Facebook at the time, they wouldn't have bought it because there's no point in differentiation. But they looked at it as a professional network. They want to move more Office 365 subscriptions. It felt like a good purchase. So, maybe beyond recurring revenue, how differentiated your offering is in the marketplace, how unique, is going to be one of those kind of key drivers of company value.
Got it.
We call it the monopoly control of value builder. It's our little name we use.
So you naming things, I noticed in your system, you've got a lot of names for things, and even in the book, they called it the 5-step logo design process. A lot of companies won't apply that type of unique branding to what they do to distinguish themselves. So is that something that you always recommend when you're trying to increase value?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, take ownership over the nomenclature, right? Create your own blue ocean, your own category of one. As soon as you define yourself as a generic category, like I'm an accountant or I'm a massage therapist, it invites for the customer the ability to compare you with everybody else. So you're an accountant. Great. Well, there's 3 other accountants down the street and they charge $200 an hour. Why do you charge $300 an hour? You're all of a sudden commoditizing yourself. Whereas if you've got the 12-step financial management system, or fill in the blank, you've got something that makes you unique and special. When you've got something different, you have pricing authority to some extent. When you have pricing authority, better margins, and it creates a domino effect. So really, you want to own the nomenclature around your company, the naming, the branding, because it gives you a point of differentiation. Yeah, you could call yourself a generic bike shop or generic massage therapist, whatever, but really what you want to create is something unique that you're a blue ocean or a category of one.
Great advice. So as you're building a company, and whether you want to sell it or not, actually that's a great point you made at the beginning of the book, is when you're building something to sell, it's really building with the option to sell, right? That if you build a stable company that is valuable in the eyes of an acquirer, you can decide to keep it, and that's a perfectly fine option. So of all the steps on the way on that path, where do you see most small businesses struggle to create value in a business that could sell?
Yeah, I mean, and it's why I think what you do is so good and so important for business owners. It's really structuring a business so that it can thrive without the owner. That's the one. If you could draw a common theme or thread across all of the 8 drivers we measure, it's really, can this business thrive without the owner? And if the answer is no, you really don't have a sellable company. But if the answer is yes, you've got something, you might have something. In many cases, you will have something that will be attractive to an acquirer. And so thinking through everything through that lens, including how you're systematizing the business, right? Like how you're training employees to be able to deliver on what you offer when you're not there. What are the training systems that you've got in place so that your business can actually succeed without you, the owner? That's really the big theme, if you will, across everything that we do.
I love that. So we talk at Trainual a lot about you learn to do something, and then you have to document it, and then you can delegate it. And that 3-step process of figuring out how to do something consistently, how to document it, and how to delegate it really creates value in the business. So you, in the book, you talk about an instruction manual and creating a step-by-step instruction manual. A lot of the companies that we talk to say, that sounds good. That's a project I'd like to get around to, but it's never urgent. So what do you say to that when people...
Man. You've hit on something that is so important. It is the quintessential problem in what we do, and that is that building value is never a burning platform. Right? Unless you're 6 weeks away from selling, in which case it's way too late. It's always, as Stephen Covey talked about the 4 quadrants, it's always the highly important but never time sensitive. Like you can get through another day without documenting the process for turning on the lights in the office in the morning. Right? You can get through one more day. You can show up early and make sure the lights are on. It's never going to be the critical burning bridges. So I think somehow you have to manufacture that. Whether you hire a business coach or you use a Google Doc with tasks, whether you kind of name and claim some sort of promise to the world, like you're going to get this done by this date, you're going to document this system and there'll be penalties if you don't. You have to somehow manufacture that urgency because your business won't do it for you. Your business will always be thirsty for another sale, another employee that needs vacation approved or whatever. There'll always be a burning fire that you're asked to deal with. It's never going to be documenting that important system. And so, it's one of the main reasons that so many businesses fail to sell. Did you know that only 1 out of every 10 businesses listed by a business broker actually ever transact, sell? So these are guys who have built businesses for 10, 20, 30 years, right? Gone through the process of hiring an intermediary. Still only 1 out of 10 of them actually sell. And so, the other 9 are left empty-handed. So this stuff's important, but it does take someone with tremendous discipline to put the big rocks in, as Stephen Covey says so eloquently. So I don't know the answer to that one. Let me know if you ever figure it out.
I will, for sure. So another question that we get asked is there an appropriate company size or something, a level of maturity that you begin to document? When should you start to standardize your processes in the business?
I mean, the obvious answer is when you've got employees. So much is changing in a very young, early stage company that you can spend, I think, a lot of time, a lot of cycles documenting processes that change dramatically. So, I think you're probably a better expert to ask on that. But in the very early days, if your business is pivoting and changing, you may end up spending too much time documenting process and not enough time figuring out what's going to stick. But as you start to zero in on what they call a product market fit, right? So when you start to see, okay, this product seems to work with this kind of customer, maybe you've hired your first employee or two. I think that's when you start to document when it's not going to, frankly, be wasted effort.
Now, how long before you want to sell the business should you really start getting serious about making this plan, and whether it's a transition plan or a plan to document, or how in your experience and in the 4 companies you've built and sold, what's that timeline like?
Yeah, so I would say as early as you can possibly do it. It's funny. The more you can start making decisions about your business through the lens of how would an acquirer think about this? I tell you a story. I do this podcast and I interview a different entrepreneur every week and say, tell me about your exit. It's all about companies who sold. And I interviewed this guy who had a frozen yogurt company. And he said, I was describing the business and he said, yeah, I went to market. And I always wanted retail stores. I wanted people to recognize me in the community. So I wanted retail stores, my frozen yogurt. But he also made the frozen yogurt and he sold it to Kroger's and other big grocery stores. And this is a pretty big company, $60 or $70 million. I can't remember the exact amount, but a substantial company. And so he goes to market with this hybrid business, right? It's got some retail stores and they also manufacture this frozen yogurt. And he says when he went to market, he got crickets. People either kind of knew what to do with a retail company and they knew what to do with the distribution food brand, but this kind of hybrid of a food brand that also had its own retail stores was just kind of an anomaly that they didn't know what to do with. And so he got virtually in fact, he got no offers for the company. He went in a fire sale basically and sold off the business for just the distribution business, i.e. the brand and the distribution into stores like Kroger. And literally the day after he made that sale, the acquirer shut down the retail stores. So all of the millions of dollars and the hours and years of headaches managing that retail sort of footprint was for naught. It was a complete red herring, something that he could have put, grown a business much more carefully and successfully if he just focused on what an acquirer would value. And so I've always stuck with that story in my head is if he had been thinking early, what would an acquirer value? What acquirers value is the brand, the distribution into the retail, big box food stores. They don't value a bunch of minimum wage employees on street funds selling ice cream. That's just not what acquirers care about. And so had he known that going in, even though he might have been 10 years away from selling, he would have made different decisions in his business. So I'm a big believer in, to your earlier point, whether you want to sell now or in 10 years, if you can start to think through the lens of how would an acquirer think about this, I think it makes a ton of sense.
You almost have to put your investor hat on and look at your business as an outsider and wonder how much you would buy it for.
Yeah, exactly. And ask yourself, would I buy this thing for what I think it's worth, right? If not, why not, right? Is it because it's too dependent on you personally? Do you have too much customer concentration? Is one, client generating most of your revenue? Have you done a crappy job documenting what you do? Do you have a crappy brand? Are you buying revenue? There's all kinds of reasons why an acquirer would look at your business and say, I'm not interested. Mm-hmm. But again, the common theme is, would your business succeed without you personally running it every day?
Right. And going back to your book, it started off with an example of someone wanting to sell their business because he didn't want to be in it anymore. And he was faced with the reality that, a business that you don't want to be in anymore isn't very attractive to an acquirer. So
yeah, it's the horrible truth about what we do is that the moment you want to sell is like the moment your business is least valuable, right? and the opposite is true, right? When your business is the most valuable, you'll never want to sell it. And so it's the irony of what we do is that that when people get burnt out and they get tired of their business, and it's exactly the wrong time to sell it. So it's just one of those ironic things.
So if you're following your playbook and going through your implementation guide and building a business that does have value, a lot of entrepreneurs wonder, what is my company worth? And are there back-of-the-napkin calculations or what resource would you recommend for someone to try to understand the dollar value they could put on their company today, or maybe what they're shooting for in the future?
Yeah, in fact, go to valuebuilder.com and you'll actually get that. We have a questionnaire. You can take about 15 minutes to complete it, and we'll give you a score out of 100. We'll also get you connected to one of our certified value builders who can give you the estimate of value based on the questionnaire you complete. We found the average business that starts the value builder questionnaire achieves a score of 59 out of a possible 100. And those businesses are trading at about 3.5 times their pre-tax profit. For our graduates that get all their value builder score all the way up to 90 or greater out of a possible 100, those businesses are trading at 7.1 times pre-tax profit, or more than double. So first step is figure out your score and figure out how to grow your score from there.
Excellent. So valuebuilder.com. Anyone out there that is wondering what the value of your business is, check it out, valuebuilder.com, and take the assessment. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. So thank you for that. Great. As we move into the end of this, I guess the last question I would ask you is, if someone wants to create a more process-focused company, is there a simple first step? When someone says to you that, like in the book when the guy went to his mentor, his TED, if I have a TED, what is the first step in trying to create a sellable asset?
Yeah, I mean, what Ted did with Alex in the book is he just sort of tried to get Alex to think about what are the projects or what are the products that you sell where you really feel like you're adding value. You kind of, athletes talk about being in the zone, right? We've all, as entrepreneurs, I think, sold things where we're like I didn't add a lot of value there. It wasn't, it wasn't highly differentiated. It wasn't something that we really specialize in. But on the other hand, hopefully there are products and services when you do sell them, you're like, yeah, like we should be doing more of this. This feels right. This feels really differentiated. And when you identify that, it's really trying to peel back the layers and figure out what's your unique process. And it's hard to do on your own. It's great to get somebody to interview you. And if you can find a journalists by training are really good interviewers, right? Like they're really good at peeling back the layers to try to, they ask why 5 times during an interview. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a unique opportunity to find a journalist or someone who's really good at asking questions and just get them to interview you. Because if you've been doing it for years, the chances of you being able to sort of articulate it or identify it are pretty low. But if somebody really tries to say, so why are you really unique at doing this? And what's your unique process for doing this? And tell me more about that. And how does that work? You start to distill down to what is the sort of essence of what you do.
Great. So closing the loop, full circle back to creating that product, that service that is teachable, that is valuable, that is repeatable, and then developing recurring revenue to continue to build value in your business and be attractive to an investor. So I love it. Thank you so much for the guide that you put together through that book and for all of the lessons you continue to give through your articles online and your videos. Where can people find you today if they'd like to follow you?
Yeah, valuebuilder.com. All roads lead to ValueBuilder, and you'll find me there.
Okay, perfect. So check John out at valuebuilder.com. He is, as we said at the beginning, not only a best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, but the foremost expert in selling, building and selling businesses. And if you haven't read Build to Sell, like I said, one of my favorite books, so please do check it out. John, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening to Process Makes Perfect. If you're watching on YouTube, we do have an audio version available everywhere you listen to your podcast, so be sure to check that out. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review and be sure to subscribe to the channel here. And we'd love if you would tell a few friends or family or anyone you think that could benefit from this. You can find me on social media anywhere at Chris Ronzio or the company Trainual. That's Train UAL, like a training manual, at Trainual, anywhere you want to follow us. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.